Hi, seniors. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite elements in fiction, magical realism. Magical realism is seen in Latino literature, which, as you know, is my favorite genre of literature. So I'm very happy, and this is one of my favorite books, and it has lots of magical realism, and it's one of the many reasons that I love it so much is because of the specialness in this magical realism here. So, let's examine magical realism. First, the subtitle, I put the beauty that reality can be. That's kind of the way I think of as magical realism. It's very easy to kind of think of when you just looking at the title. So it's realism, you're having a real world, real ideas, everything could happen, but then you just kind of add those magical elements, okay? These are not like magic like Harry Potter, Hermione, okay? These are magic of the world, okay? And so one thing to really understand is that this magical realism is that it's supposed to be portrayed as real. So how I kind of try to understand magical realism is if you think, like, I don't know, let's say you're daydreaming in class, like you would never do that. But if you're daydreaming in class, usually you kind of, I would think people daydream about things that have some aspects of reality, but it's kind of that what if, like what if this happened, and that's what magical realism. It's still the real world, still real people, but it adds just this beautiful element of what could happen and just these ideas of unexplainable things happening. So let's examine this a little bit more, and I will explain with our book that we read for chapter 1. Yay. Okay, so again, what is magical realism? So it uses a backdrop of realistic elements with instances of the magical in order to portray an unconventional reality to the reader. However, the way it is written, the audience is supposed to believe that it's real. I mean, the readers know, we know that that it did not really happen, but all the characters, especially the main characters, the narration, they're explaining, well, this is why it happened. Like with our book here, as you read in the first chapter, she was born because she smelled onions and started crying, and so that's why she's had such a sad life, that she flowed into this world through her own tears. Okay, did that really happen? No. Was she born in the kitchen? Yes. But it makes this more romantic, this idealized, this exaggeration of who she is. She's had such a sad life that she was even born into tears. Okay, so it's exaggerating, again, the characterizations, the ideas, and the philosophies of this book. So, really important to understand, it is not addressed as magic. Okay, there's no card tricks, there's no pulling a rabbit out of the hat. Okay, it's normal, it's rational. Okay, so this is not fantasy. It's not like Harry Potter. Magical realism differs from pure fantasy because it is set in a normal, modern world with authentic descriptions of humans and society. The characters in here are supposed to be portrayed as real. It is a portrayal of humanity, but then kind of throwing in these exaggerations. And most of them, the exaggerations, are coming through emotions. Okay, so to understand a little bit more, so why do they do this? Why did they do this exaggeration, this playing with reality? They do this to show the paradox in society. They do this to exaggerate the opposites in the novel. It challenges opposites like life and death. And a lot, especially in Latino literature, it challenges the pre-colonial past versus the post-industrial present. In our book, we're going to see that there's two main paradoxes in here. dealing with the tradition. So we have the tradition of the family and these unrealistic, very harsh and cruel rules put on women, and then the political strife of Mexico. So this is set during the Mexican Revolution. So going back, it's characterized by two conflicting perspectives, one based on the rational view of reality and the other on the acceptance of the supernatural as a prosaic reality. So again, you even have in the book, you have these conflicts where these things happen, and kind of the characters who were supposed to jeer and not like, they don't accept the supernatural, the superstitions of the things. They don't accept the ideas of the folklore basically being put in here. But the heroes are the ones who accept the magic, the supernatural. Okay, so elements, other elements besides the paradox and the conflicts of magical realism is the transformation of the common and the everyday into the awesome and unreal. Again, your day just gets a little bit better when you have a very interesting daydream, taking that boring everyday into something exciting, something that maybe could happen. So there's elements of dreams in our story. At the beginning, there are some dreams in here, but there are also some hallucinations that play with this as well. But the elements of dreams, fairy story, or mythology combined again with everyday. However, the frame, the base of the story is realistic. So if someone would say, what is like Water for Chocolate about? The reality is the frame. Oh, it's about this Mexican family in Mexico during the Mexican Revolution, trying to get by, struggling in the new transitions of the world. Alright? Realistic frame. However, then you go into the details, and it is explained through this one woman's torturous life underneath her mother, and how her emotions get the best of her, and then this magic comes out through the food. So one thing, if you like food, you're going to love this book because there's recipes. And it's really fun. You can try to make some of these things. Also, one thing is a strong narrative. It has to have a really good narrator to go and explain why this is important, what this really means, to give that backstory to it. So that's very, very key. So you have a strong narrator, and then we'll have the dialogue to understand this amazing heroine here. Okay, so let's go into our book to understand. So understanding this using like Water for Chocolate. So if you want to follow along here, or we can look at page 11 here. So Tina lowered her head, and the realization of her fate struck her as forcibly as her tears struck the table. From then on, they knew, she and the table, that they would never have even the slightest voice in the unknown forces that fated Tita to bow before her mother's absurd decision, and the table to continue to receive the bitter tears that she had first shed on the day of her birth. Still, Tita did not submit. Okay, so chapter 1, already we see the opposing forces. We have the mother, who is very tyrannical, and then we have the daughter, who is rebellious, who is wanting to marry, who is wanting to break tradition, and who is wanting to get away from things that she just thinks are very ridiculous. If you also look on page 12, there's kind of a conversation again emphasizing this opposition Congratulations, she said. This is Mama Elena speaking. Your stitches are perfect, but you didn't baste it, did you? No, answered Tita, astonished that the sentence of silence had been revoked. Then go and rip it out. Baste it and sew it again, and then come and show it to me. And remember that the lazy man and the stingy man end up walking the road twice. But if a person makes a mistake, and yourself, and a moment ago, that was my sewing was. Are you starting up with your rebelliousness again? It's enough that you have the audacity to break the rules in your sewing. Okay, so again, you have this opposition from the traditional. She did it perfectly, but then it wasn't the traditional way, so she had to rip it out and do it again. In chapter 2, as we read, we will find out that there's also the rebellion in Mexico as well, and so we have these two incidences acting as parallel to again enforce the upheaval, the rebellion that is going on in society. Okay, and so through that, the transformation of the common and the everyday into the awesome and the unreal. So we have these ideas of opposition here, and they are exemplified through the magical realism. All right, so through Tita's tears that we'll see in chapter 2, and through all these other things, we see that the turmoil, the emotions of what they are doing. So let's look on page 5 and 6 to again see how these normal everyday things are transferred into things that are awesome and unreal. So Tita was so sensitive to onions. Anytime they were being chopped, they say she would just cry and cry. When she was still in my great-grandmother's belly, her sobs were so loud that even Nacha, the cook, who was half deaf, could hear them easily. Once her wailing got so violent that it brought on an early labor, and before my great-grandmother could let out a word or even a whimper, Tita made her entrance into the world prematurely. Right there on the kitchen table, amid the smells of simmering noodle soup, thyme, bay leaves, and cilantro, steamed milk, garlic, and of course, onion. Tita had no need for the usual slap on the bottom, because she was already crying. As she emerged, maybe that was because she knew then that it would be her lot in life to be denied marriage. The way Nacha told it, Tita was literally washed into the world on a great tide of tears that spilled over the edge of the table and flooded across the kitchen floor. So again, this everyday event of birth, of the mother's water breaking in the kitchen, them having to have the baby in the kitchen, it gets exemplified that it was caused because the baby was crying so loud in the mother's womb that it flooded and she came out and she was washed away in this tide. So, but it's put in such a way that it just in the story it seems real. Again, it's one of these legends. It's one of these myths. If you're in a family like mine, you have these stories of things that maybe you did as a child or your grandfather did, where each time they're told, they're re-embellished more and more and more to be a little bit more interesting. Okay, so that again, that's kind of an example of that, the magical realism, that exaggeration of things. And again, this is a family tale here. This is the niece telling the story. Okay, elements of dreams, fairy story, or mythology combined with the everyday. Sorry, I had to go into chapter 2 for this because there weren't any real dreams in chapter 1. So she cannot dream in chapter 1, which again, that shows the lack of magical realism there. Without her being able to dream is just huge. It enforces just how she cannot think or do anything because she's so upset about the situation. So because she can't, she has these hallucinations because she's fighting against her emotions. She's refusing to admit how hurt she is, of losing the love of her life. And so because of this lack of using her emotions, this lack of sleep, not being able to dream, to get these emotions out, she's hallucinating. The first hallucination she has is that she thinks she hears a chicken inside of an egg. And then she gets scolded by her mother, of course. So here's another example on page 33. Tita stood as if in a trance, staring at the whiteness of the sheet. Only for a few seconds, but long enough to cause a sort of blindness. Whenever she looked, she saw the color white. When she looked at Rosario, who was writing out some invitations, she only saw a snowy ghost. But she showed nothing, and no one noticed her condition. So again, this hallucination, she's seeing things, she's in this dream state, kind of this trance. She's seeing white everywhere because of the wedding, because she's pure. It's very, and then of course because her sister has hurt her so much, she sees her sister as a ghost, meaning that her sister's kind of dead to her because of what she is doing to Tita. Okay, so that's some elements of the dreams coming in, the fairiness. Okay, so again, the frame is realistic. It's about family life, daily routine, birth of a child. Again, you just summarize the plot. It's very normal. It's the details of that make it magical. Okay, so a strong narrative on page 7. Says, from that day on, Tita's domain was the kitchen, where she grew vigorous and healthy on a diet of teas and thin corn gruels. This explains the sixth sense Tita developed after everything concerning food. Her eating habits, for example, were attuned to the kitchen routine. In the morning, when she could smell that the beans were ready, at midday, when she sensed the water was ready for plucking the chickens, and in the afternoon, when the dinner bread was baking, Tita knew it was time for her to be fed. Okay, so again, this is an example of just how keen the narrator is, explaining everything, making everything balanced, which is key to this. You have to have someone explaining what is going on, and the narrator in this book is excellent in doing that and explaining, well, this is happening because of this. So when we continue reading this and it gets even deeper into the magical realism, hang on to the narrator because she explains what is going on. Okay, so I want to show you just 2 short clips that are kind of examples of some magical realism. You might have seen the movie Big Fish, but I think you'll understand better. So here is him explaining his father's birth.
His birth would set the pace for his unlikely life. No longer than most men's, but larger. And as strange as his stories got, the endings were always the most surprising of all.
Okay, so you can see the magical realism in that because again, everyday, ordinary event of birth, but then he just pops out, flies down the hallway to explain how his life was extraordinary. He was just a little different than the average person. So these elements really explain and exaggerate the characterization. Here's another short clip. So for the first time, here he is seeing the love of his life, and this is what, according to him, happened.
And I met mine, almost. They say when you meet the love of your life, time stops. And that's true. What they don't tell you is that once time starts again, it moves extra fast to catch up.
Okay, so I hope that illustration helps you understand a little bit more about magical realism. So again, you have the reality. He saw love at first sight, but then it for him actually time stopped. Did it really happen? No. Okay, but again, it's the magical aspects of it. So if you have any questions about magical realism, please write it on the blog and I'll get to them. We can discuss in class. We will be doing some more things in class. So I really hope that, one, you read the first chapter of this wonderful, awesome book, and that when you're reading, you're picking up the elements of magical realism and you're appreciating how beautiful they are and how wonderful and amazing the language is in this book. So thank you. Have a good day.